Hook the mystery. Every country on earth has a budget. Every government keeps accounts. Every central bank claims to know the numbers. And yet, some nations mysteriously thrive, while others spiral into endless crisis, no matter who's in charge, how hard people work, or how many reforms are promised. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. Nations don't rise or fall based on what's visible. They rise or fall based on an invisible ledger, a hidden balance sheet that doesn't appear in public budgets, elections, or headlines, but quietly decides who gets capital, who gets punished, and who gets rescued. Tonight, we're going to expose where that ledger came from, who writes in it, why it keeps nations trapped in cycles of boom and collapse, and why the same pattern is repeating again right now. Setting the stage money before the ledger. To understand the invisible ledger, we have to go back before modern money. For most of history, power came from tangible things: land, labor, gold, trade routes. Empires rose by conquest or commerce and fell by famine, war, or corruption. Debt existed, but it was personal. Kings borrowed from merchants. Cities owed tribute. When debts became unbearable, they were erased through default, war, or collapse. There was no global referee. That changed in the late 17th century. In 1694, England quietly created something revolutionary: the Bank of England. It wasn't just a bank. It was a new relationship between government and finance. For the first time, a state outsourced its survival to permanent creditors. Instead of raising taxes or conquering land, governments could now borrow endlessly as long as lenders trusted the system. This was the birth of sovereign debt as a machine, and with it, the first entries in the invisible ledger. Origins: how the ledger was born. Fast forward to the 19th and early 20th centuries. Industrialization exploded. Wars grew expensive. Empires needed more money than gold could supply. Enter central banking, bond markets, and international lenders. When the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, it didn't just stabilize banking, it centralized power over money creation. After World War I, countries were buried under debt. Germany's reparations, Britain's war loans, France's obligations, everything was connected. Then came the Great Depression. Governments defaulted, currencies collapsed, banks failed. The solution wasn't to reduce debt, it was to reorganize who controlled it. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system locked the world into a dollar-centered financial order. Institutions like the IMF and World Bank emerged, claiming to promote stability and development. But behind the rhetoric, something else formed: a global hierarchy of creditworthiness. Countries weren't just nations anymore. They were balance sheets. And the invisible ledger began tracking who could borrow cheaply, who paid punitive interest, and who would be forced into austerity. The rise: how the ledger rewarded compliance. In the decades after World War II, some countries rose rapidly. The United States, Western Europe, Japan. They had access to cheap credit, favorable trade terms, and emergency liquidity during crises. Why? Because they sat near the top of the invisible ledger. Their currencies were trusted. Their debt was considered safe. Their institutions aligned with the system. Meanwhile, developing nations were told the same story over and over: borrow to grow. Open markets. Modernize. Loans flooded into Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia. At first, it worked. Growth surged. Infrastructure expanded. Living standards rose. But the ledger never forgets. Interest compounds. Exchange rates shift. Commodity prices fall. And suddenly, the math flips. The breaking point when the ledger turns against you. In the 1980s, the trap snapped shut. The U.S. raised interest rates to fight inflation. Dollar-denominated debts exploded overnight. Mexico defaulted. Then Brazil, then Argentina, then dozens more. The response wasn't forgiveness. It was structural adjustment. Cut social spending. Privatize public assets. Raise taxes. Slash wages. The invisible ledger demanded payment. The same pattern repeated in Asia in 1997. Countries with strong growth collapsed in weeks not because of laziness or corruption, but because capital fled and debt denominated in foreign currencies became unpayable. Even Europe wasn't immune. After 2008, Greece discovered the brutal truth. Membership in the system doesn't protect you if your ledger entry turns red. Bailouts didn't save Greece, they saved creditors. The ledger was balanced. The country was broken. Fallout: what the ledger cost societies. When nations fall on the wrong side of the ledger, the damage isn't abstract. Hospitals close. Pensions vanish. Unemployment soars. Young people leave. Political extremism rises. Trust collapses. And here's the most disturbing part. The debt often never goes down. Countries pay for decades only to owe more than when they started. Because the ledger isn't designed for repayment. It's designed for control. Failed fixes. Why reforms don't work. Governments try everything. Austerity, stimulus, currency pegs, currency devaluations. Nothing fixes the core problem. Because the problem isn't spending, it's position. If your country borrows in a currency it doesn't control, depends on capital flows it can't regulate, and must appease creditors to survive, you are governed by the ledger, not voters. Even successful recoveries often come at the cost of sovereignty. Policy decisions are pre-approved. Budgets are monitored. Reforms are enforced. The nation survives. Democracy weakens. Modern parallels, the pattern repeats. Today, global debt is higher than ever, over $300 trillion worldwide. Interest rates are rising again. Emerging markets are struggling. Developed nations are running historic deficits. And new tools have been added to the ledger. Credit ratings, swap lines, sanctions, digital currency frameworks. Access to liquidity is becoming conditional. Once again, the invisible ledger is shifting. Some countries will rise. Others will collapse, not because of effort or morality, but because of where they sit in the system. The three takeaways. First, national success isn't just about productivity or governance, it's about financial positioning. Second, debt is never neutral. It creates power relationships that outlive governments. Third, systems that promise stability often trade sovereignty for survival. Warning: the open question. The invisible ledger has shaped the past 300 years of history. It has crowned winners and erased nations without a single shot fired. And now, as debt reaches levels never seen before, one question matters more than ever. When the ledger resets again, who will be written off, and who will write the rules?